our beautiful teacher, Mrs. Early Moreno Mulo, to my beloved classmates, good morning. I am Maria Isabel Bolaño Rancho from Parihog, Santa Maria, Romblon. This morning, I will explain to you about the 7 steps in project planning, 11 steps of project planning process, and the basic requirement of planning. What are the 7 steps in project planning? Here are the 7 keys to successful project planning. Number 1. Think of your plan as a roadmap for stakeholders. Every project needs a roadmap with clearly defined goals that should not change after the first phase of the project has been completed. All stakeholders benefiting from the outcome or involved in executing the project should be named and their needs stated during the initial program planning process. These stakeholders might include the following: the project manager, the customer, the team. The project manager or the person ultimately responsible for completion, and the customer who receives the deliverables. This can be someone on your team, an internal or an actual paying customer, and the team or the people responsible for any tactic that's part of the plan. Don't assume that you automatically understand each stakeholder's needs and goals. Before you get too far into documenting your project plan, talk to them to make sure you really understand the project and abilities and resources of anyone on the team. Next, break the project into a list of deliverables. Develop a list of all the deliverables. This list should break down the larger project into smaller tasks that can be assigned to specific team members, and you should include estimated deadlines associated with each deliverable or task. Make sure that you understand and document the approval process for each deliverable. If your project is for an external customer, make sure you are clear on the internal approval process so that you're not surprised by delays or slow down with wading through competing opinions. Number 3. Talk to your team. Identify by name all individuals and or organizations involved in each deliverable or task and describe their responsibilities in detail. Otherwise, miscommunication can lead to delays and the situation where team members may have to redo their work. Hold a kick-off meeting to talk to your team about your intended plan of attack. Ask them to help you think about the best way to get the work done. Not only will this help you be more efficient, it will help you to get their buy-in because they'll feel more ownership over the process. Using a project management tool like Basecamp can be helpful, keeping everyone on track and storing documents and conversation all in one place. If you use email to communicate about project, consider using a team inbox email solution that will allow you to assign email that needs project-related attention to team members as appropriate rather than endlessly forwarding huge conversation threads back and forth. Next, identify the risk. Determine the risk involved in your project. Think through what you'll do if something takes much longer than expected, or it costs end up by being much more than you initially anticipated. You don't have to have a specific course of action identified for every possible negative outcome, but you should spend some time with your team, thinking through what could go wrong. Then you can do as much as you can to mitigate those risks from the outset rather than being caught off guard later. Risk factor can also have some influence on how you budget. Number 5. Create a budget. Attached to your list of milestone and deliverables should be information about the project cost and estimate budget. Resist the urge to assign large dollar amount to big project without identifying exactly how the money is intended to be spent. This will help your team understand the resources they have to work with to get the job done. When you're setting your initial budget, these numbers might be ranges rather than absolutes. For certain items, you might need to get quotes from a few different vendors. It can be helpful to document the agreed upon project scope briefly in your budget documentation. Or in that case, it will end up needing to make changes to the larger project based on budgetary constraint, or if your vendor doesn't believe or deliver exactly what you expected. Number 6. Think about your milestone within the SMART framework. Your goal should be the SMART, or specific, measurable, acceptable, realistic, and time-based. When we say specific, it is clear, concise, and written in language anyone could understand. When we say measurable, use number or quantitative language when appropriate. Avoid vague description that leaves success up to the personal or subjective interpretation. And when we say acceptable, get buy-in from stakeholders on your goals, milestone, and deliverables. And when we say realistic, stretch goals are one thing, but don't set goals that are impossible to achieve. It's frustrating for your team and for your stakeholders, and might ultimately delay your project because accomplishing the impossible usually costs more and take longer. And when we say time-based, we can set a concrete deadlines. If you have to alter deadlines associated with your milestone, document when and why you made the changes. Avoid stealth changes or editing deadlines without notifying your team and relevant stakeholders. Next, number 7, set progress reporting guidelines. This can be monthly, weekly, or daily reports. Ideally, a collaborative workspace should be set up for your project online or offline, where all parties can monitor the progress. Make sure you have a communication plan. Document how often you'll update stakeholders on progress and how you'll share information, like at a weekly meeting or daily email. The secret to effective project planning and management is staying organized and communicating well with your team and stakeholders. Whether you decide to use project management software or not, think about where and how you store all the materials and resources that relates to your project. Keep everything in one place if you can. Now, let us proceed to the 11 steps to successful project management. The first step is to define the project. When you define the real purpose of a project, things get clearer, your mind starts buzzing with ideas. Knowing where you want to end up is especially important at that stage. Your vision for the most successful outcome helps you to establish a guidelines for keeping yourself and your team on the right path. Step 2. Identify and meet with your stakeholders. It's important to remember that stakeholders are not only the people who hired you to manage the project. A stakeholder is anyone who's affected by the result of your project. It includes your customer and the end users too. Make sure you identify all stakeholders and keep their interest in mind when you create your project plan. Meet with the project sponsors and key stakeholders to discuss their needs and expectations, and establish the baseline for project scope, the budget, and timeline. Then, Create a scope statement document to finalize and record the details of the project scope, get everyone on the same page, and reduce the changes of costly miscommunications. Step 3. Set and prioritize goals. Once you have a list of stakeholder needs, prioritize them and set specific project goals. This should outline of the objectives of the project, the benefits you hope to accomplish. Write out your goals in your project plan so it's clearly communicated and easily shared. Let's proceed to the step 4, which is establish measurable criteria for success. How can you know if your project is going to be successful if you don't have any way of measuring success? You will need enter a milestone, especially for an endeavor that will span a long time so that you can determine if you are staying on track or straying from the project's goal. You must have both internal checkpoints and client checkpoints. Never leave incorporating a client's feedback until the very end of the project. Next is the step 5. Define critical project, milestone, and deliverables. Identify the crucial moments throughout the project. You can provide a life cycle of the project by including the 4 main phases: initiation, planning, execution, and closure. Perform a real evaluation at the end of each phase. Make sure to examine every deliverable, from part of the products to the technical documents to the project plan. You will need of all the elements involved to ensure the product is meeting the project specification. Let's proceed to the step 6, which is to select team members and assign the responsibilities. Gather your team member and make sure that skill sets align with required roles. This is an important first step. If you assign the wrong person to the task, you are reducing your chances of success before the project even begins. And make sure each team member is clear on what is expected from them and when. Clear and open communication is mission critical. Let's proceed to the step 7. Choose the right software for project management. Behind every successful project, there is a stable and comprehensive software solution that provides the necessary background for effective project realization. When searching for the right project management software solution for your company, have in mind that a quality solution should provide the following functionalities: the ability to define project tasks, ability to track if the project tasks are on schedule, the effective communicate with stakeholders, the managed resources, people, including the people, money, the tools, the time needed to achieve the project goals. And of course, it can define the project templates, the budget versus actual, the project planning in phase and task, the budgeting of project and milestone, generate cost and revenue against project, invoice-based project milestone, generate project profit and loss statement, add resources, time and expenses to project, set realistic deadlines, and of course, manage the scope changes. On to step 8, which is creating the project schedule. Look at each deliverable and define the series of tasks that need to be completed in order to accomplish each one. For each task, determine the amount of time and it will take, the resources necessary, and who will be responsible for its completion. Next, identify any dependencies. Do certain tasks need to be completed before others can begin. Involve your team in some of the planning process. The people doing the work have important insight into how tasks get done, how long they'll take, and who's the best person in to tackle the specific task. Next is the step 9, complete a risk assessment. No project is risk-free. You should carefully examine all issues that you know of upfront that will affect your project. Consider the steps you could take to either prevent certain risks from happening or limit their negative impact. Conduct a risk assessment and develop a risk management strategy to make sure you're prepared. Let's move on to the step 10, which is test deliverables. Deliverables should be tested at every critical milestone, and the final product must meet the project requirements. Before moving on to the next phase of the project, you need to be sure that the product is coming along as planned. The next step is to evaluate the project result. Project has been completed, and it is important to do a post-mortem report, even if it is only for internal purposes. You can pinpoint what went right and what went wrong, determine what could or should have been done differently, and establish the best practices for use in future undertakings. Let's find out if what are the 5 basic requirements of a good project plan. The 5 basic requirements of a good project plan are the following. It should be accurate. When we say accurate, it means that all details are correct or exact. Next is accessible. Accessible, it means that it is affordable, popular, or it is capable of being reached. We can see it anywhere and anytime. Next is clear. When we say clear, it means that it is very obvious, not causing or allowing doubt, or free from any confusion. Next is precise. When we say precise, it means that exact or accurate in any details. Next is specific. When we say it specific, it means that it is clearly defined or identified. That's all about my report. Thank you so much for your time. God bless us all and keep safe everyone.